Good morning, everybody. This is the Men's Sunday School class here at Mercy Baptist Church. My name is Robert Rathbone, and we've been going through the life of David here, mainly in 2 Samuel. And anybody that's familiar with the life of David knows we would eventually get to this event in David's life, and this is his sin with Bathsheba. David has been characterized by the Lord as being a man after his own heart, and yet even so, he fell prey to a weakness that, even though men and women can be ensnared by this, men particularly have a weakness to the lust of the flesh. And David's lust leads him to commit adultery with the wife of another man, and then his desire to cover up his sin leads him down this dark path that results in the even greater sin of causing not only her husband's death, but the death of several other innocent men who also died, as we'll see later on in this lesson. Jesus told us, if a man looks on a woman to lust after her, he's committed adultery already with her in his heart. The Pharisees thought, well, if you don't commit the act, then you're okay. It doesn't matter what you think; it's whether you commit the act or not. But Jesus said, no. If you've looked on a woman with lust, you've let it go through your mind and entertained that thought, then you've committed adultery already with her in her heart. The only thing that you're missing is opportunity. David, as king, he had the ability to create his own opportunity, as we'll see. A lot of times, we as men will let a pretty face turn our head, and we let thoughts run through our mind that if we were allowed to act upon them, we'd have been committing adultery like the Lord said. But here David has the ability to create an opportunity for himself because he's king. He has latitude of things that he can do. He can order people around. He has the power to create that opportunity so that he can act on his baser instincts, his sinful nature. But before we get into it, and before I get too far ahead of myself, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Dear Father, I want to thank you again for your love and mercy and grace, Lord, for presenting us, Lord, with the lives of people, Lord, in Scripture that I know, even though they belong to you, Lord, you don't just show us a whitewashed version, but, Lord, you show how that they are human just like us, Father, and that so that we can see, Father, that if we're not careful, we can fall into the same pitfalls and the same sins as they are. So help us, Father, now learn from this lesson this morning, Lord, that we may protect ourselves to not to follow in that footstep, Father, of letting sin drag us down into even deeper sin. So, Lord, all these things we ask in the precious name of Jesus Christ. Amen. All right, so we are... I guess I neglected to give the scripture passage. We're in 2 Samuel chapter 11. Our book has us covering the first 5 verses and then verses 14 and 15. But here in 1 Samuel chapter 11, the first verse, it says, "And it came to pass, after the year was expired, at the time when kings go forth to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they destroyed the children of Ammon and besieged Rabbah, but David tarried still at Jerusalem." All right, first line, it says, "And it came to pass," it says, after the year was expired, when at the time when kings go forth to battle. Now, when wars in that day were typically not fought in the wintertime due to the hardships of that the cold weather presented. It made for some miserable camping out for to be camped out in the middle of winter, ready to go on the battlefield. And the Jewish New Year corresponded to March in our calendar. So it says after the year was expired, in other words, after the end of the year, and because their year ended in March, according to our March on our calendar. So the writer is referring here after the New Year's, after the year had expired, and this is springtime, and so the weather is warming up. And so he says it came to pass after the year was expired, at the time when kings go forth to battle. This is when kings started mobilizing. If they're going to do something militarily, if they're going to go to war against another nation or go capture land from an opposing nation, then this was the time they would start doing it. And so this is when they chose to begin their military campaigns. And it says at this time, he says that David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they destroyed the children of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. So David, if you read the previous chapter, chapter 10, Ammon had basically picked a fight with Israel, and David had responded, and at that time he sent Joab as well. He sent Joab to basically deal with Ammon. And so this is hostilities that had already began, and now it's the new year, the weather's warming up, and so David sends Joab to go finish the job, to deal with the children of Ammon. And I didn't look up if Rabbah, if that was a capital city of Ammon, but it was a city that in Ammon that they were attacking, they were besieging it. But notice David sends Joab. He doesn't go himself. That first line says, when kings go forth to battle. Well, it said he sent Joab, his servants with him, and all of Israel. So and then it says, but David tarried still at Jerusalem. So as the king, it was his responsibility. I mean, the buck stops here, as they say. It was David's responsibility to wage war against Israel's enemies, to protect his countrymen. But just like he did in the previous year, he sent Joab to oversee it, to do it, instead of going himself. So a lot of commentators say, well, it starts off, David is shirking his own responsibilities. He's handing it off to someone else, to his general. And what happens in this chapter wouldn't have happened if David had went like he was supposed to onto the battlefield and saw to his responsibilities. All right, so verse 2, it says, and it came to pass in an eventide that David arose from off his bed and walked upon the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman washing herself, and the woman was very beautiful to look upon. All right, so it says it came to pass in an eventide. The Hebrew word for eventide, it can mean night, it can mean sunset. So apparently either the sun was setting or is about to set, it was setting, or else it had just set. So it's kind of unclear as to how much light there was. But it says it came to pass in an eventide, or in other words, one evening, David arose from off his bed, which kind of begs the question, well, what was he doing already in bed? So apparently he's lounging. He's letting Joab take care of his responsibilities. He's lounging at home. Of course, in that day, today, we got electric lights and TV to watch and all this stuff, and we stay up to all hours of the night. Back then, when you had to come up with some sort of artificial lightning, be it candles or torches or whatever. You didn't stay up much past sunset. So it may have been David was getting ready for bed, or had went to bed early. But it says he arose from off his bed, so apparently he couldn't sleep. And it says he walked upon the roof of the king's house. Now, in those days, people often slept on the rooftop in the open air during warmer weather because they didn't have air conditioning back then. And so it was more comfortable to sleep on the rooftop at night. And so he's up there. Apparently, for whatever reason, he can't sleep or hasn't fallen asleep. So he gets up and he's just kind of idly walking around his rooftop. I guess he goes to the edge and he looks out over the landscape and just curiously looking around, and then innocently in and of itself. But then it says, and from the roof he saw a woman washing herself. So apparently David's house is taller than most of the other houses. Some commentators even suggest his house may have been on a hill. And so from his rooftop, he's able to look down to the courtyard of the surrounding houses. And he happens to see this woman bathing. And apparently it's going to be for ceremonial reasons, because we'll find out later that this woman, which we'll find out her name's Bathsheba, she is cleansing herself from her menstrual period, apparently, from her uncleanness. And we'll find out that according to Mosaic laws, she had to go through a ceremonial cleansing. So apparently she's doing this. We'll look into that in a little bit more detail in a minute. And commentators they kind of debate on whether or not how much responsibility lies on Bathsheba for what happens here. The writer here in 2 Samuel doesn't seem to put any kind of emphasis on her role in it. It is more, it's all David. David's the king, therefore the responsibility lies on him. He chose to do this, and this, and it all seems to be his fault, his responsibility. All right, so, and the woman may have believed that she was bathing in private. Apparently it was getting dark, or it may have been after dark. She probably was behind a courtyard wall, so people from the street wouldn't be able to see her, but maybe she didn't think or consider that somebody such as David would be looking over from his roof and being able to see her. It may be she thought, well, it's dark enough, nobody's going to see me. I'm in the privacy of my own home. I'm going to do this. He may have been able to see her by the light of the setting sun. It may have been by a torch she might have had lit to give her enough light to be able to see what she was doing. But apparently it also let David see what she was doing. But some of the commentators even point at Bathsheba and say, well, she should have known that, maybe she intended on David seeing her or being able to see her, but we don't know. The writer, though, seems to be putting the blame on David. And it says, and the woman was very beautiful to look upon. The Hebrew word for beautiful there means good. It can mean pleasant. It can mean agreeable. So it basically is saying that she was pleasant to look upon. And then you throw in the word very. So she was very pleasant to look upon. She was, the idea, I guess, same thing as we use the English expression good looking. This person was good to look at. It was, very agreeable to look at. So not only was she pleasant to look upon, she was very pleasant. She was very beautiful. And David immediately becomes mesmerized and infatuated by her beauty. just one. I mean, we don't know how long he watched her, if it was just a few seconds or a few minutes, but he's immediately taken with her, and he's like, I got to see more of this. So verse 3, it says, And David sent and inquired after the woman. And one said, Is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? All right, so immediately he sees the woman, and now he wants to know more about her. He's wanting to say, who is this woman? I got to, he's liked what he saw, and he wants to see more. And so David is following his flesh here. He instead of saying, nope, I shouldn't have seen what I did see, I need to forget about her, go on about my business. But instead, he's asking. He apparently calls his servants and says, who is this woman? Who is it that lives at that house, 2 houses down or wherever it was? And so they come back and they tell her, says, well, is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam? And so now he knows her name, and that she's the daughter of Eliam. And Eliam is listed as one of David's mighty men in 2 Samuel chapter 23, verse 34. And Eliam is the son of Ahithophel, which was one of David's advisors. And later on, Ahithophel, when Absalom rebels against David, Ahithophel sides with Absalom, and it may be that Ahithophel remembers what David did with Bathsheba and the fact that he causes Bathsheba's husband to be killed. It may have been something that he remembered, and it's something he had held against David all this time. And so she's Bathsheba. She's the daughter of Eliam, one of David's mighty men, the granddaughter of one of David's advisors. So this is not just some stranger. She's part of, or a family member of people that he's familiar with. And then it says she's the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Uriah is also listed as one of David's mighty men in that same chapter 23, verse 39. And even though he was a Hittite, he apparently was loyal to David, and he was loyal to Israel. And that loyalty ends up coming back to get or working against David, as we'll see here in a few verses. Verse 4, it says, And David sent messengers and took her, and she came in unto him, and he lay with her, for she was purified from her uncleanness, and she returned into her house. So David sent messengers and took her. And it's unclear if, he sends men down there to get Bathsheba, and it's unclear if he makes the invitation that she was free to decline if she chose to, or if David used his position as king to make it difficult for her to say no or to refuse. And if Bathsheba resisted any at all or complained or said, no, I can't do that, that would be adultery, it's not recorded here. All it's saying is that, David sent messengers, they retrieved her, and they brought her back to David. The writer still seems to be placing all the responsibility on David alone here for what happens. And so it says, And she came in unto him, and he lay with her. And of course, laying with her means, he had sexual intercourse with her. So when she arrives, she comes into his bedroom, and you know what happens next. And then it says, For she was purified from her uncleanness. And this uncleanness, again, is her menstrual uncleanness. It was she went through her menstrual period, and that was apparently the reason that she was bathing herself when David saw her. She was completing the required ceremonial cleansing that was described in Leviticus 15, verses 9 through 30. And because she had finished the cleansing, that meant David could lay with her without becoming unclean himself. And because she has been menstruating, it means that she was ready for conception. And of course, that becomes the inevitable result of David's little evening of passion here. And it says, and she returned into her house. So after David gets finished, he sends her back home as if nothing had happened. He saw her, his lust gripped him, and he acted upon his lust, and then when it was done, he sends her back home. And so verse 5, it says, and the woman conceived and sent and told David and said, I'm with child. All right, now it's unclear, and I'm not sure, and I didn't ask to find out when a woman conceives, how long it takes before she realizes that she's pregnant. It might have been a month later when she misses her next menstrual period, maybe. I don't know, but at whatever point it is, this amount of time has transgressed, and all of a sudden she realizes, hey, I'm with child, I'm pregnant. And normally, well, it appears that this was the one and only sexual encounter between Bathsheba and David during that time. Otherwise, I'm sure the Bible would have told us that they had other occasions. But normally, this would normally, between a husband and a wife, that would normally be joyous news that, hey, we're going to have a baby, we're going to have a child. But when you're have engaged in a extramarital adulterous affair, that's horrible news. And the law of Moses declares the penalty of adultery to be death. Leviticus 20:10 says, and the man that committeth adultery with another man's wife, even he that committeth adultery with his neighbor's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. In Deuteronomy 22:22 it says, if a man be found lying with a woman married to an husband, then shall both of them die, both the man that lay with the woman and the woman. So shalt thou put away evil from Israel. So this was serious business here. Bathsheba, they didn't have abortions back then, so there was no way that Bathsheba could cover up the fact that she was pregnant. And so, and Uriah knew, because, hey, I've not been home. I've been out at the war, fighting in the war, so you committed adultery. So it was inevitable that he would bring the accusation against her, and I'm sure Bathsheba wasn't going to bear this penalty alone, so she would have in turn named David and said, well, David the king, he's the father. And so this is causing a dilemma here for David and Bathsheba, actually, but particularly for David, because now suddenly they have the sentence of death hanging over their heads if they get accused of adultery. All right, so now our book has us skipping to verse 14. Now in verses 6 through 13, David immediately tries to figure out how to cover this up. He wants to hide the real reason for Bathsheba's pregnancy, so he sends for Uriah under the guise of, I want to hear about what, how the war's going with Joab. So he calls Uriah back from the front lines where Israel's fighting Ammon. And David hopes that since he's back in Jerusalem, he's so near his house. Apparently his house is just a few within the immediate neighborhood around David's palace, that he figures Uriah will go home, he'll sleep with his wife, and it'll look like this child is Uriah's. But he didn't count on Uriah's loyalty. And when Uriah doesn't go home and do that, David asks, well, why did you not go home? Because Uriah, that night, he slept at David's door with the rest of David's servants and did not go home to see his wife. And so David asked him, well, why did you not do that? He says, how can I, the ark of God, Joab and the rest of Israel, they're in tents, on the front lines. How can I go home and enjoy a night with my wife and enjoy sleeping in my own bed when they're out there camped out on the ground? He had a sense of loyalty and faithfulness, but that worked against David. So then David tries to get Uriah drunk and thinks he gets drunk. He starts losing his inhibitions. He'll forget about all this loyalty stuff. He'll go home and sleep with his wife. Well, that didn't work either. He still kept his sense of loyalty. So David's realizing that Uriah is eventually going to discover that his wife has been unfaithful, that she's pregnant with a child that's not his, and he's going to be making an accusation of adultery. What am I going to do here? How are we going to solve this problem? So verse 14, it says, and it came to pass in the morning that David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. So it says, came to pass in the morning. This is the next morning after getting Uriah drunk. And I suspect David has lain awake all night probably thinking, how am I going to solve this problem? How am I going to solve this problem? And so it says, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. So David has concluded that the only solution was for Uriah to die, because if he's alive, he's going to come home, he's going to find out his wife's pregnant, know the child's not his, and he's going to raise Cain. He's going to make accusations. And so the only way to solve this problem, Uriah has to die. And so he writes a letter to Joab with instructions on how to accomplish this. And the ironic thing of it is Uriah, he gives the letter with these instructions to Uriah. Uriah apparently does not have access to be able to open the letter and read it. And again, Uriah, I guess his loyalty, he knows it's none of his business. These are instructions for the general. I'm going to take them to him. And so Uriah is personally and unwittingly carrying the instructions that's going to result in his death, takes them back to Joab. In verse 15 it says, and he wrote in the letter. So David sending the letter, and in the letter he writes this. He says, saying, set ye Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle, and retire ye from him, that he may be smitten and die. So David's instructions are that to assign Uriah to the most dangerous area of battle, and then abandon him so that the enemy could kill him. And apparently David is considering Uriah's death not to be murder because he didn't kill him. It was the enemy that would be killing him. And this is how David justifies it to Joab. After the fact, because he sends a letter back to Joab saying that it was the nature of war for people to die, and there's no way to predict who would die and who would live during a battle. I mean, there's just fortunes of war. He says one will die just as easily as another one. So that was David's way of reasoning to justify what he did. That well, I didn't kill him. It was just the fortunes of war. The enemy killed him. He could have lived. He could have died. That's not on me. All right, now that's all the verses that our book has, but in verses 16 through 27, Joab, of course, follows David's instructions, and he sends Uriah to lead an attack against the part of the city where he knew Uriah would meet the strongest resistance. And the result was Uriah died, but also several other Israelite soldiers died with him. And so David's sin here has resulted not only in Uriah's death, an innocent man, it's also resulted in the death of several other Israelite men that had nothing to do with it. So then Jacob sends a messenger back to David with a report on how the war was progressing, and he knows David is going to become angry when he hears that he has attacked a certain portion of the city where the strongest resistance is. That's a tactical error. And so he tells his messenger, he says, when the king starts complaining that why did you do it this way, tell Joab why did you do it this way? Why did you do that? How foolish was it to do it that way? He says, mention also, he says, that Uriah is dead. Because then, when David hears that Uriah is dead, then he would know that the only reason Joab did that was to follow David's instructions on allowing Uriah to die. So when David hears that, he responds with a message back to Joab that he should not be concerned about what had happened, since anyone can die during a battle, and that he should continue the siege against Rabbah. That's the city they were besieging in verse 1. This is until he was able to take the city. So now, during this time, Bathsheba is now mourning over her husband because he's dead. No doubt she still loved him. Whether we don't know how complicit she was or how cooperative she was in this in her adultery with David, but she apparently still loved her husband. So she's mourning over her husband. And then once her mourning was over, David takes her as his own wife. And then it says she bears him a child. So this is at least 9 months has transpired here, perhaps even longer. But the chapter ends with this ominous statement. It says, "But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord." That's verse 27. And David apparently believes that he's successfully hidden his sin. He's gotten away with it. But the Lord, who sees everything, who sees everything that we do in secret, the Lord knew what David had done, and what David had done displeased the Lord. The Lord was not happy with what David had done. And next week we're going to be in chapter 12, where we're going to see that God is going to hold David accountable for his sin. And we see from this what happened with David here, that a sin that seems relatively minor can lead into a deeper sin and a deeper sin. And you wouldn't have thought, and I'm not sure David probably wouldn't have thought himself capable of orchestrating the death of another human being like this, of an innocent man. David had killed many guilty men when he felt like he had just cause to do it. But this Uriah was an innocent man, and but his sin, in an effort to cover up his sin, it led him down this dark path to where he ends up being essentially guilty of murder, even though he tried to justify it and reason in his mind that it was not sin, that it was not murder, but the Lord sees it differently, because a man died because of David. All right, so we'll be in chapter 12, and we'll see the price that David has to pay because of his sin. So we'll pick up there next week.